The fourth largest criminal enterprise on Earth. After weapons, after drugs, after human trafficking, $21 billion a year, moving through the same routes, the same networks, the same corrupt officials, the same shell companies as every other category of organized crime you've ever heard of. Except this one comes in boxes marked agricultural products. It comes in suitcases with false bottoms. It comes duct taped under a woman's shirt at Miami airport, alive and squirming. It comes in the hold of a cargo plane, sedated and packed in tubes and wrapped in damp cloth, and most of it dies before it arrives, and that loss is already priced into the margin. This is your life as a wildlife trafficker, not the poacher at one end, not the billionaire collector at the other, the person in the middle, the logistics, the movement, the gap between the jungle and the living room that someone has to fill. You fill it. How you got here. You did not wake up one morning and decide to become this. Nobody does. The entry point is always something smaller. A favor. A connection. A single transaction that goes smoothly and pays well enough that you do it again. You grew up near a port city. You know how cargo moves. You know the rhythms of the inspection schedule, which shifts are thorough and which are not, which manifest descriptions invite scrutiny and which slide through, which freight forwarders ask questions and which ones have an established understanding that questions are not part of the service they provide. This knowledge is not criminal. It is just knowledge. It is the knowledge of someone who grew up in proximity to the machinery of international trade and understood how it worked before they understood how it could be exploited. The first job is reptiles, not glamorous, not the headline animals. A consignment of ball pythons and blood pythons, protected under international treaty, but not the kind of seizure that makes the news. You arrange the paperwork through a contact. The documentation describes the animals as captive bred. They are not captive bred. They were collected from the wild in West Africa by men who are paid almost nothing for the risk they take, packed into fabric tubes and handed down a chain that ends with you putting them in a shipping container bound for a reptile collector in Germany who has been buying this specific variety for 11 years and has never once asked about the paperwork. The container clears customs. You make more in a week than you made in a month before. You do it again. Then again. The pythons become a proof of concept for something larger. The network. The network is not what films make it look like. There is no cartel meeting, no round table with men in suits deciding who controls which species. It is messier than that and more distributed and more resilient precisely because of that distribution. You are one node in a system that has hundreds of nodes, and losing any one of them does not collapse the system. The system roots around you the way water roots around a stone. Your suppliers are in 3 countries. None of them has ever met you in person. Communication happens through encrypted channels, through intermediaries, through systems that are deprecated and replaced every few months before any surveillance operation can get traction. The buyers are in 4 other countries. Some of them are private collectors. Some of them are traditional medicine suppliers. Some of them are exotic pet dealers operating behind legitimate business fronts that hold the correct licenses for the species they are legally allowed to sell, which creates convenient cover for the ones they are not. The movement is the art. You are not smuggling drugs, which is dense and measurable. You are moving living things, which are irregular and fragile, and require conditions to survive and die in ways that generate their own evidence and need to be disposed of, and whose deaths need to be accounted for in the documentation in ways that a customs officer might scrutinize if the mortality rate in the manifest looks wrong. You learn the ratios. How many animals can be packed into a given volume before the mortality rate becomes statistically implausible in the paperwork? How to label the containers so they are routed through the inspection points with the lowest dwell time? How to bribe the official at the transit hub who has a salary that does not cover his children's school fees and who has been taking envelopes from people in your position for 3 years? You don't think of this as corruption. You think of it as a cost of goods like packaging or refrigeration. It goes in the spreadsheet. The cargo. The higher value work involves animals that are worth more per kilogram than cocaine. A single plowshare tortoise from Madagascar. There are approximately 400 left in the wild. The conservation status is critically endangered, which means the legal trade is 0. The illegal trade is approximately $24,000 per animal to the right buyer. You move 3 of them in a single consignment, hidden inside a larger shipment of legal reptiles, declared as a different species whose paperwork is clean. The tortoises are sedated, packed in foam, sealed in a crate labeled scientific specimens. They arrive. 2 survive. 1 doesn't. The one that doesn't is a write-off. The 2 that do generate $48,000. The total cost of the consignment, including the animals, the transport, the documentation, and the envelope to the inspection official, is $11,000. The margin is the reason people do this. Pangolins are different. The scale of the pangolin trade is difficult to internalize. 1 million poached in a decade. The most trafficked mammal on Earth. The scales used in traditional medicine. The meat considered a delicacy. The demand primarily in China and Vietnam. The supply from sub-Saharan Africa and Southeast Asia. The movement in bulk, in tons, scales stripped from the animals before they travel, packed in sacks, mislabeled as industrial materials. You don't handle the pangolin trade yourself. The volumes are too large for the methods you use. But you know the people who do. They are not exotic. They are business people with overheads and distribution networks, and they think about logistics the same way you do. They think about it with more precision than most legal importers because the consequences of a failed shipment are more severe. The live primate market is its own world. A chimpanzee for a buyer in the Gulf states. A baby gibbon for a collector in Eastern Europe who will put it in a cage in his house and post photographs of it on social media, and when it grows into an adult and becomes unmanageable and dangerous, he will try to sell it back into the chain. And there is a chain for that too. The babies come from poachers who kill the mothers. Always the mothers. Because the mothers are what stands between the poacher and the infant is what has the market value. The mortality rate between capture and delivery is high, very high. For every live primate that arrives at its destination, multiple animals died in the process of producing it. This is also priced into the margin. This is always priced into the margin. The methods. You have watched the smugglers get caught and you have studied what they did wrong. The woman with the turtles duct taped under her shirt at the airport. She was an amateur. She had no network, no legitimate freight business, no false documentation, no understanding of how inspections work. She had 2 turtles and a flight and nothing else. The people who get caught at airports are almost always amateurs, which is why the professionals don't use their own bodies anymore. Bodies are unreliable. Bodies go through X-ray machines. Bodies get nervous. The professionals use freight. Legitimate freight businesses, either owned outright or infiltrated at a key position, moving large volumes of legal goods with consistent, established relationships with customs officials at both ends. The wildlife moves inside or alongside the legal freight, declared as something else, documented as something that exists in the legal trade, routed through transit points where the inspection regime is known to be lighter. The sophistication of the concealment matches the value of the cargo. Low-value bulk shipments like reptiles get basic concealment. High-value live animals like great apes or big cats get elaborate concealment inside modified crates with oxygen supplies and sedative dispensers timed to keep the animal unconscious through the highest-risk inspection windows. The dark web has changed the lower end of the market significantly. Reptiles and birds and invertebrates are sold openly on marketplaces that are technically illegal, but practically accessible to anyone who knows where to look. The buyer is a collector in the Netherlands. The seller is a supplier in Indonesia. The animal is packed in a padded envelope and sent by international mail, and most of the time it arrives. When it doesn't arrive, it is because it died in transit, which is a refund claim, or because it was seized, which is absorbed as a cost by someone in the chain. The volume of the postal traffic means that meaningful inspection of every package is operationally impossible, and the traffickers know this and exploit it at scale. What you know that they don't. The investigators are good. You have respect for them. The wildlife crime units at the customs agencies, the officers at the Fish and Wildlife Service, the analysts building trafficking route maps from seized shipments and DNA evidence from animal parts, Operation Thunder, the global Interpol sweep in late 2024, 138 countries, 6 criminal networks identified, 365 arrests, 20,000 live animals. Those are real numbers and they represent real disruption to real supply chains. But 20,000 animals in a global operation represents a fraction of the movement. The estimates put the total illegal wildlife trade at $21 billion annually. That is the fourth largest criminal economy on Earth, and it is largely invisible in the way that all markets are invisible until they aren't. The people who are arrested are the careless, the amateur, the ones who made errors the professionals know not to make. The professional tier operates at a level of documentation and logistics sophistication that is genuinely difficult to distinguish from legitimate trade and is designed to be difficult to distinguish. That is the investment. That is what the margin funds, not the animals, the invisibility, the same routes. That is what the security analysts keep noting. The same routes, the same networks, the same corrupt officials, the same shell companies as the drug trade and the arms trade and the human trafficking networks. The overlap is not coincidental. The infrastructure was already there. Wildlife trafficking is, for many criminal organizations, a supplement, a diversification, something to fill the container that would otherwise travel less than fully loaded. The incremental cost of adding a layer of wildlife contraband to an existing drug shipment is low. The incremental revenue is not low. The logic is simple, and it is the same logic that built every other branch of organized crime, the arithmetic of what you're doing. You don't think about the animals the way the conservation organizations think about the animals. This is not callousness. It is professional distance. A doctor does not think about the cellular level consequences of every prescription they write. You do not think about the 40% mortality rate of the primates in transit. You think about the consignment, the route, the documentation, the contact at the transit hub, the payment terms. But the numbers exist whether you think about them or not. 1 million pangolins in a decade. Both species of African rhino now threatened with extinction partly because of this trade. A population of plowshare tortoises that has been reduced by poaching to approximately 400 animals. The forest ecosystems that lose a keystone species and reorganize around its absence in ways that produce consequences across every other species in the system. The zoonotic disease pathways opened by the movement of wild animals through unregulated conditions across continents. The last virus that did that cost the world several $trillion and is still debated. The next one is incubating somewhere in a shipping container and nobody knows yet which container. You know what you're doing. You are not unaware. You are making a calculation in which the consequences are real but distant, and the money is real and immediate, and the risk of getting caught, while not negligible, is significantly lower than the risk of being a drug trafficker, and the sentencing, when it happens, is lighter. In the United States, a wildlife trafficking conviction carries a maximum sentence of 5 years. A cocaine trafficking conviction carries a maximum of 40. The animals are worth less to the legal system than the powder. The traffickers know this and they factor it in. The day it goes wrong. Your shipment is in Nairobi. It is a consignment of live reptiles, legally declared species on top, a layer of critically endangered chameleons underneath packed in. Individual cloth bags inside a false bottom. Standard methodology. The transit should take 16 hours. You are tracking it through the forwarder system. The update stops at the airport. You wait. The update does not resume. You call the contact at the freight company. No answer. You call the backup contact. No answer. 4 hours later, you see it on the news. A wildlife seizure at Nairobi airport. A shipment. A significant quantity of illegally concealed animals. The seizure is described as the result of an intelligence-led operation. Intelligence-led, which means someone talked or someone was watching or your system has a hole you did not know was there. You do not know yet which it is. You do not know if your name is in anything. You do not know if the customs official who has been taking your envelopes for 2 years is cooperating with investigators in exchange for lenience. You do not know if the freight company is under surveillance, or if your communications are compromised, or if this is an isolated seizure, or the beginning of something that has your name at the end of it. You know one thing. You close the laptop. You leave the apartment. You do not take your phone. The network will route around this the way it always does. Some of the animals in that container will be transferred to a conservation center. Some will have died already. The investigation will take months. Whether it reaches you depends on facts you cannot currently assess. You are good at what you do. You have been doing it for years, and the margin has been good and the risk has been managed. Today, the risk has presented itself in a way you did not anticipate. You walk, you think, you calculate. This is what you do. You calculate. The $21 billion industry continues without you while you walk and think and calculate. It does not need you specifically. It just needs someone. It always finds someone. It found you once, 8 years ago. A favor, a connection, a single transaction that went smoothly. You remember thinking, just this once.